Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 17th of April 2019, we are taking a look at the 6th story from the 4th series of 4th Doctor Adventures, and a story written by Jonathan Morris in the Cloisters of Terror. Now, of course, we're starting with part 1. What is perhaps a bit, as with many of these stories, an interesting bit about the Cloisters of Terror, it includes a character from a companion chronicle, much like the Requiem for the Rocketmen, including the Rocketmen. This one actually brings Dame Emily Shaw, played by Rowena Cooper, the mother of Liz Shaw, companion to the 3rd Doctor, who appeared in 4 stories and several companion chronicles, yet I didn't cover any of those companion chronicles in the marathon because I wasn't covering companion chronicles. Now, what's interesting about the Cloisters of Terror is that it sets it up as a sort of horror-themed romp without actually being horrific. As the episode essentially is the idea is that St. Matilda's College in Cambridge is an all-girls college which is being stalked by phantom nuns. Based off of a myth of Saint Matilda, who was a nun herself, a young nun who got killed, and these phantom nuns are stealing girls from the college and killing them, which is a fairly out there concept. I mean, evil nuns is a weird sort of idea. The picture of a nun is someone who is devoted to generally Christianity. It's something very, very, it's very different. And I can applaud Jonathan Morris for trying to do something different with a premise, being a story that, you really don't get a sense of, this is meant to be taken the most seriously, because a gaggle of nuns is quite creepy, but it is quite creepy imagery. There's some rather cheap horror films made about evil nuns, mostly ones that are panned by critics. Jonathan Morris takes this premise and rolls with it and injects the script with enough camp to realize that this isn't entirely meant to be taken seriously, even if he does try to do some genuinely creepy things with them, and the cover of the audio tries to sort of play up a little bit on the horror element, like, yes, nuns are scary. Ooh, they're really not. They're just women. That's about it. Not entirely terrifying. Now, quite a lot of the enjoyment of the Cloisters of Terror is actually from a lot of the character interactions. Jonathan Morris does a really good job with writing his characters and getting them to interact with each other properly. There's a lot of playing off of each other, a lot of fun stuff. Where the characters really give themselves, plenty of time to, not only just react to each other, and there's just a lot is just sent to, play of that, their characters who have to interact. One of the biggest highlights actually would be Rowena Cooper as Dame Emily Shaw. Now this story was released after the sad death of Carol and John, but oddly enough, having Emily Shaw in this story is really interesting, partially because she gets to react to the Doctor regenerating, something that was never done on television to Liz. It was never done for Emily, by extension Emily, who met the 3rd Doctor, now has almost more knowledge than her own daughter. Now, Emily Shaw, she's a very interesting thing. It's almost hand-waved away, but she's still very skeptical. She's a very fun character as well, just by the essence that, she's very much a take-no-nonsense, I'm intelligent, and I'm working for basically the betterment of these girls. And she's very much built her character around that sort of persona and a pursuit of science. Here, you don't quite get as much of the history with her, but you still get this nice sparkling personality, of her, brimming with intelligence, just really showing that she is a character who has, she's a character who knows what she's doing, and is very much in charge. She also gets some really good interactions with Leela and her staff. She has a really good rapport with the rest of the characters, and honestly, she has the potential to become a companion. Potentially, they never actually do it because they don't really do audio only companions for 4. It's only sort of hinted at, kind of, that she would make a good companion had she basically been given the time to do it, I guess. Also, Claudia Grant, who is the recasted Susan for the David Bradley adventures with Big Finish. Here's one of the girls in one of her first Big Finish roles, and you don't really recognize her because she's not doing the voice she does for Susan. She's doing a different voice, doing one that's more in line with her actual voice. What's interesting, there are a couple of issues that you can just sort of take with the first episode of Cloisters of Terror. It takes quite a bit of time to get going. It's oddly enough, it uses 28 minutes as a time, and so does the second episode. They're essentially evenly matched. They both have the same amount of time devoted to them. It's taking its time with its story, which maybe present problems in the future again because this is only a 2-part story. But as always, Tom Baker and Louise Jameson's performances both are amazing. They both have a lot of fun. Leela and Dame Emily get a lot of interesting stuff together because Morris really does pull on the Leela's educated but not traditionally, so that sort of traditional college environment is something that with subtleties that are kind of lost on the character. Something that I think was done really, really well. Something that Morris does a good job of is character work. That's where he often excels. So overall, I'm going to give The Cloisters of Terror Part 1 an 8 out of 10. It is the 18th of April 2019. I just finished listening to Part 2 of The Cloisters of Terror. And the final part of The Cloisters of Terror is interesting in that it is just as good as the first part. That's really a lot that can be said. Now, one of the big reveals that Jonathan Morris does here is the truth behind the nuns and sort of their background. So spoilers for that, because I think it's actually a really interesting idea and kind of genuinely fascinating, at least in my mind. The nuns are basically avatars of girls who have been taken to try to power this spaceship hidden in the college, hidden almost behind a TARDIS-like perception filter type thing in the cloisters of a church. Hence the title, Cloisters of Terror. The nuns basically, they go out and try to find girls who are strong enough and, can provide power, but it slowly burns them out. And it's been burning them out quicker and quicker each time. Like, the first time it took over 500 years for them to be burnt out, the first girl to be burnt out. And there are 3, so every so often each needs replacing, and they sort of get converted into this sort of hive mind theme. Not like a Cyberman, but just sort of like they lose the personal identity and they become part of just the spaceship itself. Which I think is something that Jonathan Morris does. It's really interesting what Jonathan Morris does with that. It's perhaps not explored enough in this episode, but it's explored enough to at least be interesting and to give us some fun plotting and some interesting little schemes and things. It does a really good job of that. Now, what's really, really nice also is that Leela is willing to sacrifice herself to save the day. It's this minor little plot point that happens that I just think works incredibly well. Is that, she's young, she's strong, But it's not only her. The Doctor, all at one point, is going to be ready to go and give himself to the spaceship, even though his gender doesn't quite work. They only need young females, and it's eventually this one sister who, one actual sister who works at the St. Matilda's College, who actually does end up sacrificing herself to save the day and to basically give her life so that everything can blow up. Which is, it's a really good ending. It's also really quite touching, because the Doctor and the specific nun had a really good rapport through the first episode and had a really good rapport through the second episode. So her death at the end of the episode is actually quite effective. It's perhaps not the saddest of all deaths, but it's effective enough to at least give you some feeling of like, oh, this was an actual person, an actual character who died in this story. There were stakes, and those stakes were essentially fulfilled. It's a story like that. It doesn't pull away from some of the harder punches, and that's something that Jonathan Morris does a lot and does well. He knows when to be able to be like, all right, now we need to really have the story pack a punch. It's something that, again, Jonathan, he does a good job of it. Also, some other stuff the story does, interestingly, is that it lets Dame Emily Shaw see inside the TARDIS. Something that really tests her skepticism, it seems. Like, obviously she was very skeptical of Liz and, her tales. And it's really, really nice just to have her see it. It makes it a secret that she and Liz can share, and the implications that it'll bring them together, which is, again, really, really nice, considering, obviously, Liz Carol and John sadly passed away way back in 2011. Sadly, she sadly passed. She passed away. So this is sort of almost a tribute to her. It's a fitting tribute. It's a very, very, very nice tribute. It's something that creating the character more than I'd love to see her, Dame Emily Shaw, actually make a return. She's a fun character, and Rowena Cooper plays her very, very well. Again, Tom Baker and Louise Jameson are also really good here. All the characters really have a lot of fun with the story, and they really act off each other well and give us just a good sense of almost adventure and camaraderie. Jonathan Morris, he plays up the horror elements here too. The spaceship drains energy, and that just sort of creates some with the sound design. It helps create this sound design of almost like skin peeling back and like flesh melting and things like that. It's actually quite dark, and I think that's actually really, really solid. It's a really nice dark story. I do have a couple of issues with the story. Mainly, again, the standard issue of it's only 45 minutes applies, and honestly, there was a little point where you think you could probably go into more detail about what the nuns were and what they really want and things like that, because that only gets briefly touched upon and briefly explained. So it just doesn't really, give itself the full time that it possibly could use to really tell us the full story. But that being said, I'm going to give The Cloisters of Terror Part 2 an 8 out of 10. And we add up the scores and average them out to give The Cloisters of Terror a final score of 8 out of 10. Thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you already. I always like to see comments. Even if I don't respond, I do read them. So please leave your thoughts down below. Did you like the story? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let's get a conversation going. And join me next time we take a look at the penultimate story from Series 4 of the Fourth Doctor Adventures, The Fate of KRELOS.